share with folks afterwards. For anyone I've yet to meet, my name is Deirdre Schreiber. I am the Associate Director of Learning and Development for HUIT. Just a reminder of why we've gathered folks together throughout the year for these tech talks, really encouraging the spirit of the IT Summit, where we're learning from each other throughout the year, and really also helping to strengthen connections, explore new possibilities for technology, all in support of the university's mission. So our presenters for today are from the HUIT Communications team. We have Tim Bailey, Director of Communications, Catherine Conway, Assistant Director, Service Communications and Content Strategy, and Neil Adolf Akatsuga, Senior Communications Officer, Design and Digital Content. So without further ado, I am going to pass it over to Tim.
Thank you very much, Deirdre. Let me share my screen. Everyone can see that, right? Great. So thanks again, Deirdre, for the welcome. And just to introduce ourselves a little more, I'll ask my colleagues to say a hello to everyone.
Hi, everyone. I'm Neil Adolf Senior Communications Officer.
Tim Bailey, sorry, I've skipped ahead.
I'm Catherine Conway.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Shaw, the Communications and Digital Content Coordinator.
Thanks, everyone. So what we wanted to do at today's Tech Talk is keep things really high level. So this isn't meant to be sort of an exhaustive covering every angle of this topic, because obviously this is something I think we're going to be talking about for the rest of our lives, which is a little bit depressing in its own way. But we wanted to just kind of bring to you a few high-level examples of how our team has experimented with AI, some of the pros and cons and pitfalls and things to be aware of. So I don't know if you've been looking in the news lately, you saw that there was a discovery that Microsoft had added a disclaimer for Copilot saying it was for entertainment purposes only. So in that spirit, we're going to copy that disclaimer. Don't take anything here too seriously. We probably will make mistakes, and you attend today's Tech Talk at your own risk. So we'll start with just kind of outlining how we're going to do this talk today. We decided just to focus on sort of 4 considerations to think about as you are using AI in communications work. So whether that's sort of professional level communications, I know there's some folks from HPAC here in the audience, or just kind of your everyday interpersonal office communications, emails, reports, newsletters, all the rest of it. So the 4 considerations we brought up, we decided to pick sort of one example or one theme to talk about for each one. Again, not exhaustive because there's many different angles here, but they are sort of, what are you trying to solve? Can you describe what you want? Is it worth the effort? And lastly, is it good enough to publish or share? So we'll go through these one by one. So first of all, what are you trying to solve? So right now there is so much excitement and hype about AI that it does feel at times like there's sort of pressure to use it. Part of that is the marketing hype from the companies themselves. Every time they release a new product, you'll hear it's the greatest thing that could also threaten the whole world. There's a lot of leadership enthusiasm. People are very excited about productivity gains and efficiencies and all the rest of it. And then there's sort of the FOMO aspect, fear of missing out. Like, if I'm not using this, is that going to be a problem? And should I kind of learn how to use it to catch up with my colleagues or whatever else? But one thing I think is important to think about is whether every single problem you're trying to solve automatically needs an AI solution just because it's available. So in the last 6 months or the last year or so, we relaunched our HUIT website, and that was because of the transition from Harvard Sites to Drupal as the platform. And in doing that, we thought about some of the potential for AI to help customers and others visiting the website kind of find and use resources. And obviously the AI chatbot on top of a website is kind of very flavor of the month and everyone's talking about it. So just a bit of background. The internet as exists today is kind of basically the same as it was 30 years ago, more or less. Most people are using search to find things through a web browser. And that means that websites have been designed to sort of rank higher in that list. So people will search for your site and then click on the top link and go to it. Obviously, AI is changing that quite a bit. And Google itself is one of the most significant ways. This is a study from the Pew Research Center that shows that people who are searching and finding an AI summary at the top, the Google AI summaries at the top of the search box, they're more likely to just get the information from there and less likely to actually go through and click to your website. So they accept whatever is first given to them, and so it kind of lessens the potential to visit your website. In addition to that, as we know, browsers themselves and also your device, the AI is becoming more embedded into it. So again, it's not so much like you're browsing the web. It's more like you sort of everything that your device, your browser's doing is doing it for you. So I talked about the AI summaries. Now, one of the issues for communications, both in IT and the other areas that folks in HPAC represent, is at Harvard, we have such a distributed information environment that many different unit schools, research centers, whatever, will have documentation about certain topics that are, central to the Harvard experience. So these are actually a little older, these screenshots, but the one on the left here is kind of a simple how do I get my Harvard key query. And you'll see it's pulling from three different websites, one of which is the Harvard Key website itself, a Hewitt Knowledge Base article, and then something from the Harvard Medical School. And then the other one on ChatGPT, it was pulling from an FAS IT website, again, HMS, and then the Graduate School of Arts and Science. So what it will do is kind of mash all these websites together and provide what it thinks is the correct response. But obviously, let's say that one of those websites hasn't been updated in 5 years. It may be pulling in information that is no longer accurate and giving that user then the wrong impression. So, oops. So, like I said, the common solution we hear all the time now is let's just stick a chatbot on top and kind of outsource all of our website experience to, something that people can interact with and ask the questions. Often it's because there's this feeling that there's just too much out there to browse through. People need quicker ways to access that information, and so going through a chatbot is the way to do it. But there are risks involved in any of this. So we have seen, these are just a few examples, but we've seen in the news examples of when companies stuck a chatbot on their website and terrible things happened. So Chevrolet did one, I think it was a local Chevrolet dealer, and the chatbot sold a $70,000 car to someone for $1. Air Canada had a chatbot on their website that was giving false information about the travel eligibility for a certain customer, and they were held liable for that. And then a New York City pilot chatbot, which has actually now been shut down because it was not very good, which was giving information to businesses that was directly against the local law. So it's not as simple as just saying these will improve the customer experiences because of the likelihood of AI to make mistakes and then the risk that you assume because of that. So part of the underlying problem is if your information that you want to put a chatbot on is bad or outdated, all that the chatbot is going to do is repeat that back to people just longer and with more sort of cringeworthy buzzwords and things. So if you've been on the Harvard campus tour, you'll know about the Statue of Three Lies, John Harvard. The three lies are there on the left. It's not an exact likeness of him at all. He was not the founder of Harvard University, and it was not founded in 1638. But if you were to feed that into your chatbot and you had that on your website, then it's just going to spit that back out at someone. So this chatbot isn't solving the problem there. What it's doing is exacerbating it, and the actual solution would be to go to the source information and sort of fix and correct that. So, like I said, we moved our website from OpenScholar to Harvard Sites, and Harvard Web Publishing, who ran this project, shared this really interesting stat with us that there were 1,899 websites that were migrated, but there was 10,141 websites that were retired completely in this project, which goes to show that there's so much information out there that we don't actually really need to be out there. The vast majority of the websites that action was taken on were actually deleted or moved completely. So when we took our opportunity to move to the Drupal platform, we started by going through and getting rid of our redundant and outdated content. We deleted 135 pages. We also removed a bunch of legacy links that didn't go anywhere anymore. And we also went through and streamlined our content and navigation to make it just quicker and easier for people to find what they want. So we reduced the number of menu options, drop down bars in the header, simplified the content that's on each page just to the things that people really would like to know and like to find out, and added more sort of pretty basic but effective filters so that if you are like a staff member in central admin, you can see exactly what tools are available to you based on your affiliation. So this had two benefits. The first being that it improves the customer experience now, and the website is better, it's easier to navigate, and it's giving better information. But even though we didn't set out to add a chatbot, actually the source, the sort of base of information that we have now is much better and therefore will produce better results when we do eventually explore AI-enabled experiences in the future. So, to wrap up this section, do you actually need AI on everything, or do you want to think first about the underlying issue? So, we just talked about streamlining, simplifying, and deleting bad content, emails, and things like that. Everyone's sort of rushing to click the summarize or the reply button. But do you always need to do that? Are you struggling to articulate your thoughts? Maybe just kind of get on a quick call. The emoji is a really underrated tool in Outlook. Like I always, instead of having to, generate some generic response, just do the thumbs up. That's good enough for me. And some things, before we think about automating everything, is it time to just assess, is this process or is this system, whatever, actually worth maintaining anymore? Should we just stop doing it? And so taking away, a sort of huge to-do list of things that we should apply AI to might help us make better decisions about when it might be effective. So with that, I'll wrap it up and hand over to Catherine. And I have to approve remote control my computer to do that.
It worked. Great. Oh, it worked too well. So the next consideration, I'm trying to go back one, but never mind, is whether you're able to describe what you want. So if you're going to use AI, you have to sort of teach it. You have to be the teacher and you have to think about what support materials you can provide it. My example of that is related to the HUIT knowledge base. So probably most of you have experienced our IT knowledge base and ServiceNow. There's actually over 1,000 articles, and each of those articles, or not each of them, but they're written by 100 different knowledge content authors. And that's sort of, a necessary distributed content model because the topics of these articles range from, Zoom to, cloud computing. So we need that expertise and we need, a distributed model for creating that content. On average, there's 24 articles being published per week on those topics, and there's, I think a stat from a couple weeks ago, there were 50 articles published that week. So it's a way that we create make this content creation sustainable, but it can also contribute to an inconsistent experience for users. There's 100 different writing styles, and that gets challenging. So to Tim's point earlier about like identifying what problem you're trying to solve, we've tackled that problem in a number of ways so far. We've created templates that are available in ServiceNow. We've developed training for knowledge content owners. We created a group of coaches that were available for coaching to review knowledge articles. And sort of underlying all of that is a set of guidelines that incorporate digital accessibility best practices, Hewitt writing style, and so forth. In 2023, a cross-functional group of Hewitt folks came together and thought, like, what could we do with AI to maybe make it easier for service owners to write documentation? It seemed like a great natural next step. So we did an experiment, and it was not good. It was very inconsistent, mostly bad results. It required that you have like a certain level of input. So in order to make any improvement whatsoever. So it was like it needed to be already like a C level knowledge article in order to get to like a C plus. But if you had like a C minus, it went to an F. It was really bad. And it was frustratingly time consuming to not only tweak the AI, but also to like edit and review the knowledge articles after they'd gone through the process. So it didn't seem like a tool that would be useful in the hands of service owners. But there were some opportunities we thought about kind of, as the technology evolved, perhaps building efficiencies for subject matter experts who really understood what good content would look like. Um, so it took me a couple years to get over that experience and give AI a second try. But this time, instead of building for service owners, I built for myself to see if I could develop, like create a tool that would help me with productivity when I'm helping service owners plan and edit their knowledge content. Because I'm the subject matter expert and I know what good content will look like. And key to that, so the AI had advanced to a point where I no longer needed any sort of development chops because I don't have those to create a GPT. So what I was really leaning on was that well-documented guidance that I had mentioned earlier, and then building the GPT was really easy. And I want to drill into the guidance to show you sort of what level of detail I was feeding into the GPT. So this is we publish a tool called the Guide for Writing Knowledge Articles, and it includes examples of each knowledge article type. It includes best practice guidance that we got from the digital accessibility team. It integrates things like HUIT writing style, formatting, and also like, just sort of the how to organize your content. So it's really getting into quite a lot of detail. And the GPT that I was creating was able to consume it. So in ChatGPT, I uploaded that guidance and then created this knowledge base article editor. And I did a few tweaks, much less than before in my earlier experiment, where the AI was asking me for some clarification. I also told the GPT to explain its work. You're the teacher again, so you need your student to explain their work so that every time I got output, I knew sort of why it was doing that, and I could give it more corrective feedback in the end. So the results were much better this time. On the screen, I'm showing like a before and after of a knowledge article. So on the left, you can see like it was a pretty good knowledge article, but it definitely wasn't following the guidance that we had outlined in the Guide to Writing Knowledge Articles. And I put it into the Chat GPT so that I could give this service owner some feedback, but not have to like start from scratch with like line by line editing. And you can see that it's done all sorts of things that I mentioned in the Guide to Writing Knowledge Articles. So it's like it's removed the redundant titles. It's added an introduction who says who the article is for. It's created headings. It's organized the information in consistent chunks. It's addressed things like inconsistent wording. So in one place it was saying click on a button, and another place it was saying click a button. So it really went into like quite a lot of detail. And this is going to be a great tool for me so that I can be more helpful to service owners who come to me for help, knowing that there's 24 articles being written every week. So in conclusion, just to wrap up here, just think about what sort of context you can give the AI before you decide to work with it. there's a range of guidance you can provide. You can do sort of trial and error prompts and impersonate like a professional. You can say you are a comms professional working at a university in an IT organization. But even better is if you've already got established guidance that is developed to kind of tackle the challenge that you're trying to address, and then combined with an actual subject matter expert who knows what good content is like, is the best case scenario. So now I'm going to hand it off to Neil to talk about, is it worth it?
Great. And I'm going to request remote control. Great. Okay. Yeah, so I'm going to speak on, is it worth the effort from the standpoint of designing with AI and in particular generating images? So I just wanted to pose some questions you might think about before you start a project with generating images with AI, which is, first of all, why are you using it for your design? Are you brainstorming ideas? Are you creating a simple low stakes image? Or are you crafting a complex image with detailed of defined requirements? Which AI models do you have access to? So different AI models and different versions have strengths and weaknesses when it comes to image generation. Do you need to, who needs access to your design? So do you need to collaborate with others? And if so, can they edit your AI generated image or design? So for example, Notebook LM can produce excellent slides based on your notes, but they can be difficult for others to edit and may not be accessible to screen readers. What will your design be used for? So what are the stakes? How important are all the details if made public or shared with stakeholders? And also, how much time do you have to iterate and refine? So working with AI, as with any creative tool, it requires drafting, collaborating, and refining. So success is rarely a one-shot event, but an iterative process. So that's just some things to keep in mind. Okay, so with that, this is an example of a workflow that I kind of use, especially for generating complex images with AI. So the first step of identifying the components of your target image, things like rather than using vibe words like cinematic, vibrant colors are beautiful, you're really trying to focus on concrete details of your target image. And so I've listed some of those examples here. Writing a simple prompt and experimenting. So you don't have to include every detail in a prompt, and it's often better if you do not, and you instead iterate. So attaching a reference image in particular to a prompt is a shortcut, and I think Catherine's example also illustrates this from a text standpoint, but it helps to replace written description with direct visual evidence. However, you have to make sure that even when you're crafting these simple prompts, your text description does not clash with your image data. You have to often let the reference image do the talking. Observing what repeatedly causes failures. So for example, if there is distortion, focusing the prompt on a particular element. So if the famous example of distortion is that there's too many fingers on someone's hand in an AI generated image. And so in that case, you would tweak your prompt to include hands with 5 fingers. Or if an image is too generic, how to add details. So for example, you might say like use an 85mm lens to frame this image. And also if AI hallucinates, ask AI what went wrong and how to fix it. Going to number 4, number 3. That's observing what it repeatedly causes failures. And so developing that library of fixed patterns, like I said, of how to deal with hallucination or distortion. Going to number 4 then, deciding what matters most and what can vary. So this is essentially trying to, not try to control every single pixel that is outputted, but really trying to control the workflow. And then going to number 5, creating a prompt stacked with anchors and constraints. So you're always trying to tell AI what to keep before telling it what to change. And depending on the use case and the AI model, this might include reference images, anchor, traits, or a style log. And then running structured tests. So you're trying to avoid restarting from scratch every single time. and instead using this kind of workflow to guide your iteration and get to hopefully the result that you desire. And then just a pro tip, at any point, if you hit a rollback, you should ask AI for advice. And it's not necessarily the AI tool or model that you're using to create the image with. Sometimes you just need to imagine the person you most need the advice from and ask AI to explain what went wrong or to provide more details or to help you create a better prompt. And most importantly, to ask every single follow-up question you can possibly think of, or to ask AI to ask you follow-up questions to help you clarify your idea. So with this workflow in mind, which kind of maybe quite complex, this is kind of where I judge whether it's worth the effort. And here are some examples. So in this example, as for context, this was developing an image for our digital newsletter. So this is about how and when and how to pivot. So sometimes when you're going through this workflow of trying to create an image, you're just not getting anywhere. And manual intervention may be your best bet to get to where you need to be. So sometimes that means you may have a bunch of iterations, and none of them are perfect, but some of them have the elements of what you need, and you might want to then just pull them out of your AI model and cobble them together using like Photoshop, for example, or whatever your design tool of choice is. Alternatively, if there's a flaw or feature that you can use, you may want to pull it out again and throw it back to AI after you have revised it. So below is an example of, on the left, that's the image we kind of ended with in Chat GPT, where it still had problematic elements. So there's like oval shaped ornaments. If you see the ornament at the top, it's kind of a weird blobby exclamation point. And iterating further just wasn't producing better results. So what we did was pull it out of ChatGPT and used Photoshop to adjust those shapes to be more rounded and also create a cleaner exclamation point in the top ornament. And then threw it back, not into ChatGPT, but into Gemini. And that produced the final version we ended up using, which applied a 3D effect. So it's not always a straightforward process. You're really trying to make it work for you. However, unfortunately, sometimes it just is not worth it and you have to just move on. So this is for context, a holiday card that we ended up emailing to folks, HUIT staff. And sometimes you'll run out of time or just get completely frustrated with the process and lose the will to continue to iterate. So you have to start thinking about other options, like how do you pivot and move on? And that might just mean using a well-taken photo, using stock illustration, using a template. So the example on the left was an attempt of using ChatGPT to create a pixelated image of a building at Harvard. Unfortunately, no matter how many iterations were created, it just never got the building quite perfect. And to eventually move on, it was a matter of using a design template and customizing it for our purposes. And that ended up working perfectly great well, too. So AI is not always the answer. But when may it be completely worth the effort? I think a complex case, this is taken from a course I am performing now and the class assignment. So on the, sorry, on the far left side, this is where I began. I asked ChatGPT for help with developing a short story based on the assignment description. And so I asked the model to act as an expert and attach the assignment. And then it asked a series of 20 questions about what I want the story to be. And with that information, it then produced a script that I could then use. I also at the same time was creating a mood board in Pinterest to find reference images for my character and the environment, and using those reference images and the script that ChatGPT had created, as well as prompts, it also provided me for developing the character. I created a character sheet, not in ChatGPT, but in Gemini, actually, because I found that Gemini was much better at producing the types of images I wanted compared to ChatGPT. And that's also because it's the data it's trained on. And that you can see on the far right. Um, Going back to the bottom left corner, I also asked ChatGPT for help with finally creating identity anchor blocks for the story panels. And that was based on this character sheet to create, for my prompts, this kind of text that could be repeatedly used to get this character consistently produced. Otherwise, his face would change or his hair would change. It was just requires a lot of constraints and anchors to get consistent results. And by following this process and following this method to produce all these assets, I was finally able to get the two story panels on the bottom right, where you can see that, I was able to place this character in a completely fabricated environment and also with different emotional expressions that had previously not existed. And so in that case, it was well worth the effort, but it required, a lot of planning, a lot of interaction, a lot of different tools, and also a substantial amount of time. I did have a month to work on this assignment. So that just gives you a sense of, um, if you have a defined goal in mind and the time to craft it, craft your process and craft your assets, you can get pretty amazing results. So I just want to conclude on, again, asking, why are you using AI for your design? So, for example, if you're brainstorming ideas, it's pretty low effort and it might be very much well worth it. You can start with a simple prompt, you get a bunch of different ideas. You can use any AI model really that you have access to. And the great thing is that you don't have to share it. So it might be trash or it might be gold. And that's the beauty of it. Another use case that might be great for you is if you have creating simple low stakes images. So for example, our newsletter image of the Christmas tree. So you can create with simple prompts and iterations. You might be open to different versions though, and you might have to intervene, but you can ultimately share it out, even if certain details vary. And the last one is the case of complex images with defined requirements, like you saw with my course assignment. And that really required a complex prompt, multiple complex prompts with anchors, constraints, and iterations. But I had a particular idea. I had access to a variety of tools, and I had defined requirements that I was able to achieve. So that was finally able to be shared. So in that sense, it was worth the effort. I'm going to hand it over now to Tim.
Thank you, Neil. So I'm just going to quickly wrap up based on everything we've sort of talked about so far. Just kind of the last thing and possibly most important thing is really to look at what you've got at the end of your experiments or your work and decide, is it good enough to publish or share? Um, so a reminder that I think it was 3 years ago now, Harvard issued some AI guidelines that have largely stayed the same in that time with a few tweaks here and there. But one of the most important ones is review content before publishing and sharing. It acknowledges that, AI generated content can be inaccurate or misleading and contains these hallucinations. And I've bolded the most important part. You are responsible for any content you publish or share that includes AI generated material. So keeping that in mind, you've all heard of this term now, slop. So that is in the gray bar there. That's the sort of dictionary definition of what that means. Digital content of low quality that's produced usually in quantity by means of artificial intelligence. So these three images that you can see on screen are kind of, I actually created these. So this is fresh slop, not sort of recycled or reheated slop, by asking it to create slop for me. So the sort of horrendous stuff you see on Facebook these days, if you ever open that app, which I recommend that you don't, nonsensical pictures, sort of meaningless stuff trying to imitate social media, using famous characters like Peppa Pig and Neytiri there, having a debate in what looks like Fight Club or something. A pretty depressing scene altogether. But the idea is basically it's so easy to create this stuff now that the web is being completely flooded by it. And there actually are, this is a study about the amount of AI generated content that is now surpassing the amount of human generated content on the web at the moment, which tells you something about sort of how easy it is to create this stuff and what that sort of means for our information ecosystem. So I think a key question is, does anybody actually want to read this stuff? Like it is so easy. If we were to think about Dr. Ian Malcolm from Jurassic Park, right? He says your scientists were so preoccupied whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think about whether or not they should. And it's so straightforward in our work to create this stuff that it's actually spawned a kind of subgenre of slop called work slop, where people are finding it so easy to say, hey, I'm just, I'll create this 50-page memo and sort of fill it with all of our strategies and then send that off because it's good enough. And then the person on the other end gets this memo and thinks, I don't have time to read this. I'm going to ask AI to summarize it. Plus, I've spotted like 5 or 6 errors. So instead of actually driving efficiencies and productivities, like I think, business leaders want from AI, it's actually creating a new type of work, which is kind of um, digesting all this garbage content and also fixing what's wrong about it. And it's quite easy to spot. I mean, we've now kind of reached the point of maturity with AI content that people are sort of getting wise to the hallmarks of it. And these are just very basic examples that you most of you will have heard of right now. The sort of it's not X, it's Y kind of framing of a lot of things. The M dashes, although I've sort of started adding more M dashes into my writing as a kind of silent protest. Extremely generic. One of the key things that there are more studies about these days how the use of AI in writing, even in editing, even if you're not asking it to generate new stuff for you, is making all of us sound the same, and it's kind of flattening ideas. Obviously by definition, the AI can't create original ideas. So what it does is it kind of makes it all bland, generic stuff that feels like it's come from, a corporate consultant, lots of buzzwords, very repetitive, and that sort of confident tone, but it's not actually saying something. It's not kind of um, insightful in any way. It's not sort of prompting ideas that you'd want to know about. So there is this growing backlash. These are just a couple of things that happened in the last 2 weeks where there was a journalist who was hired by the New York Times to do a book review. He used AI to do that. The AI churned out a review that contained entire paragraphs plagiarized from another one in The Guardian. So he was kind of dropped from that role. And there was a whole novel that was already published in the UK and ahead of its US release was cancelled completely because people on Goodreads and elsewhere had started questioning whether or not this had loads of AI content in it, and eventually the author confessed, and so that went away. So careless use of AI in published content is not it's not a good thing clearly, and because people are more able to kind of identify these hallmarks and this type of writing or the type of slop images that I showed you earlier, there's more scrutiny on it. In the broader context too, public opinion on AI is really skewing negative. So this is a recent poll from Pew that I saw via the Stanford AI Index, which is an interesting study or an interesting sort of memo, I guess, that was published recently on a lot of different topics. But on this chart, the blue lines represent general public, and the pink is sort of self-described AI experts. And I think that I can't exactly remember how they determined who's an AI expert, but I think a lot of people in this room, because of our involvement in IT, would have a greater awareness of slash familiarity with AI than many people in the general public. And you can see that the general public's opinion of AI is massively lower than people who are closer to it. They don't really like it. I mean, the key one here is the societal impact of how people do their jobs. Only 23% of adults have a positive view on that versus 73% of AI experts. So there is this kind of growing societal feeling that like this stuff isn't necessarily a positive. You've also seen these protests of data centers. The leaders of these organizations are coming under scrutiny and actually recently been coming under attack. So this is kind of playing out in the background as we're all being encouraged to use these tools. So I'm not going to go through all of this, but given everything that's happening in the world and in with people getting more aware of AI type communications and thinking about the appropriate time to use it, there's a risk calculation here. You've got to really sort of weigh whether the efficiency and productivity benefits are actually worth the concerns about the quality, the mistakes, and this kind of growing backlash to the use of AI. So if it's simple, like Neil talked earlier about low stakes content, if it's just like a sort of event invitation, you want to invite someone to your summer barbecue and you use AI to create a image of people grilling or something, not a big deal really. But the stuff where facts matter, obviously life and safety, if you are going to ping out an alert about some, imminent threat on campus, the last thing you need to be doing is using AI to do that and getting key details wrong. Visibility, is it just kind of a small internal group, or are you putting things on the web in publications that could be read by external people, or even customer communications, especially ones that don't have a positive opinion of AI? Who's the audience? Is it people that you know and probably therefore are more comfortable with you using AI, or is it this broader unknown audience? What's the impact of error? So if something is wrong, let's say, and you're going back to the ice cream social or summer barbecue invitation or something, if AI creates an ice cream that looks sort of wrong in some way, then not a big deal, really. People might laugh at it. But if you get a key error in a financial report that you're publishing on a public-facing website, then that could have serious consequences for Harvard and for your career and all the rest of it. And then what stage of use are you using it in? Again, if it's drafting, brainstorming, just kind of having it as your productivity partner or editing pal or whatever, then, probably not a big deal. But that final draft that you're putting out there online, then, there's a risk involved here. It's not sort of a completely sort of neutral decision to use AI anymore. There are these consequences and these considerations. So just to wrap this section up, have you thought about the risk? Remember, first of all, the Harvard guidelines because they're still very good and worth applying to your work. Do you really know what good looks like? Catherine talked about this and the importance of kind of having some guardrails. Like if you spew out a 50-page report that looks great because it's in that confident tone and it's got all these sort of consultant buzzwords in it, is it actually good, or is it just a kind of parody of what a good report would be like? And are you creating more work for your colleagues by using AI to sort of churn out all this garbage that you're just sending them? And a plea for all the comms folks in the room, please don't send AI generated stuff to your comms team and ask them to edit it. Just tell us that you want an AI article and we'll use the prompt. And lastly, remember you're responsible. Are you prepared to put your name on it? Are you prepared to fix the mistakes? And also, are you prepared to sort of acknowledge that you've used AI? People might ask, if you create a memo, share it around with people, and then you're called on that memo in a meeting and asked to talk about it, um, are you willing to do that? Are you able to do that? So to wrap up the whole talk, again, high level whistle stop tour. I think we'd all be happy to chat offline with folks if you have questions or want to explore any of these topics in more detail. But the four considerations we went through, what are you trying to solve? Are there underlying issues, things like that, that you can look at before you reach for the AI? Can you describe what you want? Do you have some level of familiarity or templates or guidance that you can provide to get better results? Is it worth the effort? As you're going through this, think about how much time and energy you're spending on this. It's not always a time saver AI. It can be a time waster. And lastly, is it good enough to publish or share? And that's about it from us. So thank you very much. And any questions, we're happy to chat.
I will just call out in case folks missed it. Some resources were shared in the chat, and I'll gather those together and share them along with the recording. But things around knowledge base articles. Suzanne gave an interesting comment I wanted to call out about the low risk, high risk as far as having social media posts as high risk since many people consume content that way. And we'll notice the AI slop. Um, and then also a question came up around the environmental impact in AI. Doris, thank you for sharing an article for that. I didn't know if you folks had any other thoughts on environmental impact in AI.
I think that's probably another one of these things that buckets into the sort of growing social backlash that it again it's a consideration. You'll often hear people saying something like, was that worth destroying a forest for that, terrible picture of anthropomorphic fruit and vegetables? Um, I do know that Hewitt is working with the the sustainability office at Harvard on an IT sustainability program, and I would encourage you to reach out to Jack Sawyer, who is Hewitt's IT sustainability lead, and I'm sure he'll be happy to talk about that with you.
Thank you. Any other questions that folks have? We've got one coming in through the chat. Do you work with an AI agent on your computer? That is your learning style of writing, creating. Would you suggest that people do this?
I would say no at this point. I think there are some security concerns about these AI agents that I know the teams at Harvard are sort of working through, but I certainly wouldn't want it crawling around my computer just yet until we know more about them. Any other thoughts from the team?
No, I don't. I don't use one.
Either.
Any other questions that folks have? Feel free to raise your hand and we'll take you off mute or add it to the chat.
I think I maybe just have an observation that, one of my takeaways was not just the effort, but the thought and the sort of professionalism of what you're all doing to prepare before going to the models for generation. And I think I'm at the beginning of that journey myself. I'm in an engineering team, where we're this generation, but we're trying to generate code, or tools to help with our code. And I think that's what I'm finding, that the preparation is important. I think that's my takeaway. And then I've seen some of the questions in chat, and it's sort of that sort of next level now, that as we each prepare or think how we're preparing, how we improve and share and iterate on that as a team to deliver value across Hewitt and academic technology.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned coding. I mean, I am not a coder, I don't have a technical background at all, and I would feel, even with things like Claude Code that I know are supposed to sort of make it easier, I would still feel I was, sort of running around in the dark because I don't have, like as Catherine talked about, that subject matter expertise or really any grounding in that at all. So even if I produce something good, that looked good to me, sorry, I think I would still fail at the last hurdle. Like, is this good enough? Like, would I want to code something for the Hewitt website and put it on there? I probably wouldn't. I'm sure I would reach out to developers and ask them to look at it, and could I be inadvertently opening the back door to cyber attacks or something by doing that? So I think that the idea that AI can make you an expert in anything, I think, is possibly overstated, and subject matter expertise is still important.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah, I really like Neil's example of I forget what it's called. It wasn't the mood, well, there's the mood board, and then you had that sort of character spec. That's really nice, and it's that sort of meta. If we think, well, I'm not a cartoonist, but if you think of like a cartoonist, right? They sort of plan all the stuff and then they create the cartoons. And as a coder, we plan all the things and then we write the code. And it's that sort of, if we want to bring generative AI to coding, we need to step back and think, how are we generating this code? And then we need to document that in a way that the agents understand. So there's there's work to do, and it's not a free lunch.
Thank you. Any other questions, or we also welcome observations or comments? Thank you, Maliki. Right. It looks like everyone is good, but as the communications team and Tim mentioned, they're happy to help if you'd like to reach out to them. Thank you so much to the entire communications team, and Tim, Neil, and Catherine for presenting. We will be sharing out this recording, the presentation materials, and I'll compile the resources that folks shared in the chat so we can share those as well. But I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.